last few years was, given an honorary degree by Spelman?
Yes.
Did you feel vindicated?
I always feel vindicated.
Noam Chomsky, what did you think of Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, third in line in succession for the presidency after Dick Cheney, going to Syria, together with the first Muslim Congress member in the United States, Keith Ellison from Minneapolis?
Well, the only thing wrong with it, it was the third person in line. I mean, if the United States government were sincerely interested in bringing about some measure of peace, prosperity, stability in the region, instead of dominating it by force, they would, of course, be dealing with Syria and with Iran, pretty much the way the Baker-Hamilton report proposed, except beyond what they proposed, because they proposed they should be dealing with it in matters concerning with Iraq, but there are regional issues. In the case of Syria, there are issues related to Syria itself, but also to Lebanon and to Israel. Israel is in control of, in fact has annexed, in violation of Security Council orders, has annexed a large part of Syrian territory, the Golan Heights. Syria is making it very clear that they are interested in a peace settlement with Israel, which would involve, as it should, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from occupied territories.
Are there secret negotiations going on between Israel and Syria now?
Never know what's going on in secret, but so far Israel has been flatly refusing any negotiations. In fact, the only debate that's going on now is whether it's the United States that's pressuring Israel or Israel's pressuring the United States to prevent negotiations on the Golan Heights and, in fact, on the occupied territories altogether. I mean, this is called a very contentious issue, Israel-Palestine, which is kind of surprising. It's a contentious issue only in the United States, and even not among the American population. It's a contentious issue because the U.S. government and the Israeli government are blocking a very broad international consensus, which has almost universal support, even the majority of Americans, and which has been on the table for about 30 years, blocked by the U.S. and Israel. Everyone knows who's involved in this, what the general framework for a settlement is. It was put on it was brought to the Security Council in 1976 by the Arab states, the Jordan, Syria, and Egypt, the so-called confrontation states and the other Arab states. They proposed a two-state settlement on the internationally recognized border, a settlement which included the wording of UN 242, the major resolution, recognition of the right of each state in the region to exist in peace and security within secure and recognized boundaries. That would include Israel and a Palestinian state. It was vetoed by the United States. Not a similar resolution vetoed in 1980. I won't run through the history, but throughout this whole history, with temporary and rare exceptions, a couple here and there, the U.S. has simply blocked the settlement, still does, and Israel rejects it. Sometimes it's dramatic. In 1988, the Palestinian National Council, the head governing body, formally accepted a two-state settlement. They had tacitly accepted it before. There was a reaction from Israel immediately. There was a coalition government, Shimon Peres, Yitzhak Shamir. Their reaction was, I'm quoting, that there cannot be an additional Palestinian state between Jordan and Israel. Additional implying that Jordan already is a Palestinian state, so there can't be another one. The fate of the territories will be settled according to the guidelines of the State of Israel. Shortly after that, the Bush #1 administration totally endorsed that proposal. That was the Baker Plan, James Baker Plan of December 1989, fully endorsed that proposal. Extreme rejectionism. And so it continues with rare exceptions. Just moving to today, The Arab League proposal has been reintroduced. It's 2002, but they brought it up again a couple of weeks ago. That goes even further, calls for full normalization of relations with Israel within the framework of the international consensus on a two-state settlement, which might involve, to use official U.S. terminology from far back, minor and mutual modifications, like straightening out the border a little where it's, you know, in the wrong place or something. And then there are technicalities to be resolved, plenty of them. But that's the basic framework, supported by the Arab world, by Europe, by the non-aligned countries, Latin America and others. It's supported by Iran. Doesn't get reported here. Everyone loves Ahmadinejad's crazed statements, but do not report the statements of his superior, the Ayatollah Khamenei, who's in charge of international affairs. Ahmadinejad has nothing to do with it, who has declared a couple of times that Iran supports the Arab League position. Hezbollah in Lebanon has made it clear that they don't like it. They don't believe in recognizing Israel, but if the Palestinians accept it, they will not disrupt it. They're a Lebanese organization. Hamas has said they would accept the Arab League consensus. That leaves the United States and Israel in splendid isolation, even more so than in the past 30 years, in rejecting a political settlement. So it's contentious in a sense, but not in that there's no way to resolve it. We know how to resolve it.
Do you think it'll change?
Depends on people here. If the majority of the American population who also accept this decide to do something about it, yeah, it'll change.
Do you think it's changing, for example, with Carter's book coming out?
I think it's one of the signs of change, and there are many others. There's just a change in mood in the country. I mean, anybody who's been giving talks about this just knows it from personal experience. I mean, not very long ago, if I was giving a talk on the Middle East, I mean, even at MIT, you know, let alone anywhere else, there would be armed police present, or at least undercover police, to prevent violence, disruption, breakup of meetings, and so on. Now, that's a thing of the past. By now, it's much easier to talk about this. The reaction to Carter's book was quite interesting. I mean, Carter's book was essentially repeating what is known around the world.
Palestine, peace, not apartheid.
Yeah. There were a couple of errors in the book. They were ignored. The only serious error in the book, which a fact checker should have picked up, is that Carter accepted a kind of party line on the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. Israel invaded Lebanon, killed maybe 15,000, 20,000 people, destroyed much of southern Lebanon. They were able to do it because the Reagan administration vetoed Security Council resolutions and supported them and so on. The claim here, you know, you read Thomas Friedman or someone, is that Israel invaded in response to shelling of the Galilee by Palestinians, Palestinian terror attacks. And Carter repeats that. It's not true. There was the border, there was a ceasefire. The Palestinians observed it. Despite regular Israeli attempts, sometimes heavy bombing and others, to elicit some response that would be a pretext for the planned invasion. When there was no pretext, they invaded anyway. That's the only serious error in the book, ignored. There are some very valuable things in the book, also ignored. One of them, perhaps the most important, is that Carter is the first, I think, in the mainstream in the United States to report what was known in dissident circles and talked about, namely that the famous roadmap, which the quartet suggested as a steps toward settlement of the problem, the roadmap was instantly rejected by Israel.
I'm going to interrupt you here because we're going to have to end the broadcast. We're going to bring folks part 2 of this conversation in the next few days. But I want to end with Howard. Tonight you'll be at Faneuil Hall in Boston. Do you have hope right now, as a man who has been part of dissident movements for many years, led them, chronicled them in these last few minutes of this first part of our discussion?
And by the way, you're going to be with me in Faneuil Hall tonight. I won't go without you, yes. But Do I have hope? Is that what you're asking? Well, I do. I think American people basically decent and good people, and if they learn the facts, and as they are learning the facts, they become aroused, as they did during Vietnam, as they did in the years of the Civil Rights Movement.
I'm going to leave it there now, but part 2 later in the week. Howard Zinn, Noam Chomsky, thank you very much. I want to thank Shrew Hodoka-Deuce and Mike Burke and Becky Staley and our folks here in New York, Robbie Karen in Boston, and Dennis Moynihan. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.
The United States government were sincerely interested in bringing about some measure of peace, prosperity, stability in the region, instead of dominating it by force, they would of course be dealing with Syria and with Iran, Lebanon, and to Israel. Israel is in control of, in fact has annexed, in violation of Security Council orders, has annexed a large part of Syrian territory, the Golan Heights. Syria is making it very clear that they are interested in.
Last few years was, given an honorary degree by Spelman?
Yes.
Did you feel vindicated?
I always feel vindicated.
Noam Chomsky, what did you think of Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, third in line in succession for the presidency after Dick Cheney, going to Syria, together with the first Muslim Congress member in the United States, Keith Ellison from Minneapolis?
Well, the only thing wrong with it was that it was the third person in line. I mean, it's much the way the Baker-Hamilton report proposed, except beyond what they proposed, because they proposed they should be dealing with it in matters concerning with Iraq, but there are regional issues. In the case of Syria, there are issues related to Syria itself, but also to